So welcome everyone, thanks for joining us. We're thrilled today to present an artist talk by Nancy Morgan Barnes. As you know, as you may know, Nancy is a skilled and delightfully quirky storyteller, leading the viewer through narratives that are rarely what they initially seem. Her work, which is characterized by the explicit rendering or order or chaos, is often humorous and frequently with a darkish twist. But make no mistake, despite the artist's joyful irreverence and attraction to offbeat subject matter, Nancy Morgan Barnes is an extremely dedicated and accomplished painter. Portland Press Herald art critic Daniel Kany has written, "The painting is gorgeous in every way. Morgan Barnes paints beautifully and builds up unusually luscious surfaces, painted, scraped, sanded, glazed, and finally varnished. Her technique, patience, and craftsmanship deliver something rarely seen since the 19th century." Nancy Morgan Barnes was born in South Bend, Indiana, earned an undergraduate degree from St. Mary's College and a graduate degree from Indiana University, Bloomington. She has taught at DePaul University and Indiana University, Bloomington. Barnes has won numerous merit awards and prizes, including a Good Idea grant from the Maine Arts Commission. Her work is in the permanent collections of Indiana University Art Museum, Indiana State Museum, and many homes of people with a developed sense of humor.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for all of you guys coming out. I'm impressed. I wanted to keep this sort of casual, so if you have any questions and you have any comments, go ahead and blurt them out. I guess I'll give you a little history. I'm from Searsport, and I have two Searsportians here, right here in the front row, Wayne and Kathy, so thank you. And I'm from Indiana, and I have a Hoosier here, too, and a former student, John Knight. So I am from Indiana. We moved here about 20 years ago. And before that, I was an academic. I did teach. And there is something different from moving from an academic tradition to moving here, where I just started working outside with no, just began to just work outside, and I met all these plein air painters in the Mid-Coast area who were very welcoming and helpful, and I would go out and paint with them. And it was a entirely different experience. I guess I would call myself mostly a studio painter, and I was that way for years and years until we moved here, and I decided to try to make some changes, and these people were really welcoming and helped me sort of learn the way to do this, to the gear, the kit that you needed to get out there and paint. And so that was an interesting experience. And also, the academic world is first of all, you do have a paycheck that comes every month. And when I met these other people, they really relied on their their painting to make a living, and that was kind of awe-inspiring to see people who actually did that, what they did maybe 100, 200 years ago. And so I was, first of all, impressed with their work, and so I would go out with them and try to learn what they offered me. And it was difficult, partly because my own sensibilities are not toward like the bucolic or the pastoral, which they had to embrace simply because whatever they painted had to sell. So they couldn't paint little bugs, and they couldn't paint little mice with little creatures running around. They really had to embrace what the market was going to give them. So it was mostly the main scenes that they really sought and painted. So once I moved here, I started to get out more and paint more, and also the whole idea too was to orient myself to the new environment that I was in. So I was out a lot and painting a lot, and I think it really helped me understand where I was. And also, when you're painting outside, there is a sense of urgency that you don't have when you're in your studio. In your studio, you have time. You can sort of sit down, change things, move things around. But when you're out there, the time is very limited. You have daylight. You have so much daylight, and the daylight is changing, so you're really forced to concentrate. You're really forced to really work quickly in order to get the sense of what you want to paint because of the quick change of the environment that you're painting in. So that's when I sort of started moving to kind of two different directions. I still have a studio. It's a small bedroom. A lot of you, I think, have been there, seen it. So I started working outside and environments that weren't necessarily bucolic. I found things in Maine that I really loved. I would go to the fairs. I like to go to sporting events. I like to go to the circus. So I found things like that were more to my liking rather than just the pretty harbors and things like that. And there's so many people that can paint beautifully those kinds of subjects that it was a good move for me. So at that point, I saw the work kind of going in two different directions. One where I was working exclusively from the studio, and then the others where I would work outdoors. But everything does come back in, and everything does get resolved in the studio, partly because I don't think that when you're out there, the light and the way things look, and you're very intense when you're out there. And when you bring it back, you make a different kind of judgment, and you see things differently. The light is different, and so most art that we experience is very rarely outside. So the resolution is always inside, and that makes a difference in terms of how I regard them and how I see them. Hi, Grant. How are you?
You have to make a lot of shifts or changes when you bring something back indoors.
It takes a while. Usually if I'm outside and I'm painting, even if it's outside in an interior, if I'm away from my studio and I'm painting, and I bring it back, I do like to just let it rest. And then just, and I do use a lot of photographic references. I do, because I will go back usually once or twice, but at the same time, I can't resolve when I'm out there. I can't finish it when I'm out there. So I do, and something just sort of happens when it sort of settles in. Hi, Tina.
Please excuse me.
I will not. So anyway, so the shift when I'm working inside, I have always. Before I came here, I was basically a studio painter, as I said before, and I worked almost exclusively with a still life. I've always been a representational painter. I love and respect non-representational painting, but for myself, I just don't go there. So as a mother, it was hard to find that I found that the still life, you could set it up, it would be there when you came back after changing diapers or after dealing with other, whatever the turmoil is with the family, that you could come back and it's there. So I could work from a still life, whether it's large or small or anything. So the still life, I think, you still have a sense of the still life in these paintings, although I think I've stretched it a little bit more than just a standard kind of wine bottle and apple on a table. But so that was another reason when we moved to Maine, is that I did want to leave the studio. The studio for me gets stale, and I find that even though I try to be very imaginative and inventive in the work, that if you don't get out, if I don't get out and sort of look at other things and work outside, then something else happens. It charges up what I'm doing in the studio. So the other paintings that that are just initiated from the studio usually are started with an idea, and then the idea I find I find sources within the photographs, or I find little things that I want to paint. I find objects that I can insert into them. I look at plants and little creatures, and I insert those. And so the idea kind of unfolds sort of slowly as I work these more invented paintings. One thing that I think is always interesting to me, and I don't know about you, John, you're an academic too, where that there is this tradition in academia where you find yourself defending yourself. You're teaching using language. You are, you have to keep your position, so you have to also use language then too. And you're teaching, and so you're using words more than you are. It's more of an intellectual exercise in a lot of ways than a visual one. And I think once you leave that, it becomes a different kind of sense for me. It sort of stepped into something that was surprising, and kind of I felt untethered after I left academia, and it was kind of exciting to move from that world into to this other one where I had no real I didn't have it to defend myself, except I'm doing it right now. But I think that's interesting. Once the atelier or the workshop, the artist workshop, where it was very visual and you were very active, once the university took over that role, the world of art, I think, changed. Do you think that?
Well, I'm at a community college, and most of my students just take 1 or 2
Okay.
art classes. So it's a little different. They don't see a lot of art. They don't go to see a lot of art. So I know what you mean about being in a university, and there's already an assumption that people are thinking about art and talking about it, but I feel like I'm outside that.
Okay. In your world.
Yeah.
Was your subject art at the university?
Yes, yes. But I taught high school for a while. So yes, but it was always that. And I think that I always knew that, in fact, one of my first memories was when I was 4, I had a sister who was 8 years older, and I was drawing. And this is strange, I remember this. And my sister was talking to my mother, and my mother said, "Where's Nancy?" And my sister said, "She's upstairs drawing her potato people." And I remember thinking, these aren't potato people. They were pretty real. So, and now we have my grandchildren living with me now, and the same thing. I look at their work, and I know how much they believe this. And they believe it to be real. They believe them to be really understood. And but I always kind of knew that this is
a similar memory.
You do?
Yeah. I mean, like, it's completely self-evident that the drawing that I just did is a woman in the rain with an umbrella. But that is not apparent to anybody else.
Well, it still happens. It still happens. When we moved to Italy many years ago, when our children were, well, many years ago, and we moved into the country, and there were again lovely people, but not a lot of, even though art in Italy was it's just pervasive. What we were doing, it wasn't sort of religious painting we were doing, obviously. So we would have people come in, and our neighbor, who was a farmer and a hunter, was showing him a portrait of my husband. I think I told you this. And he said, "What is that? A loaf of bread?" So it's very humbling. But with these paintings, I did want to go sort of a different direction in terms of just not using a standard source, and I wanted to tell more stories in terms of this work. And They don't have any, they're fable-like, but I don't believe that they have any real moral. They're supposed to be sort of visual narratives, hopefully, that they have some, they don't have real, like, social or psychological. I want them to be kind of joyful and fun. The painters that I like to look at are, I don't know if anybody has heard, have you heard of Gillian Patterson Craig, painter? Anyway, she's, I don't know, she paints, she shows at Turtle Gallery in Stonington. And she's maybe about 75 or something. And she mentions that as people get older, if you're in this field, as people get older in this field, there's a kind of, for her, and it sort of, it resonated with me what she said, that there's a kind of turning back to your own childhood in terms of what you want to paint. And hers are really thick, dense paintings. That's probably one of the reasons why I respond to them. But I do find when I was a kid, I would look at all sorts of fairy tales and legends, stories, and mythology. And I do find that that is sort of creeping into the work a lot more than it did maybe even as much as 10 years ago. So I find that what she had to say about aging as an artist and what you want to say as you get older changes. And there's this kind of thinking from the past that she's embraced and pulled into her work as well. So let's see, what else do I want to say? Yeah.
Don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but you talk about the storytelling. Could you let us in your brain a little bit and choose one of these and tell us the little kind of thoughts that go through your head as to the story?
Sure. I'll try. This is, I started out with, there was a painting I did a long time ago with a poster that I had of Piero della Francesca. And it was just a big poster that I had in my studio that I really liked. And I had it in front of the still life, and so I just painted that. And I liked the fact that it was a painting in a painting kind of thing, a story, you know, a play in a play sort of thing. And I've always loved Bouguereau. I know that Bouguereau is kind of considered sort of schlocky, but I just love his paintings. I love his hand. Do you know who I'm talking about? He's just got just an elegant hand. And so I wanted to put, this is the Bouguereau Bathers, and I wanted to put them in there, but have it be kind of sort of soft and not real legible. And so I just started to think about what I wanted in the foreground, and these sort of things kind of, I have a blue checkered cloth. I like the Campbell soup can because it was sort of Warholian. And then the bees, just the attraction, and you find these beautiful, sexy ladies in the back, and these bees, and the flower meaning, you know, birds and bees and that sort of thing. So those are the kinds of things. They do unfold. I mean, they start somewhere, and then they go somewhere else. I mean, things change, they shift. What is it, Grant?
Well, in that light, I wondered if that diagonal light shape, when did that come in, and was that a key moment for you in terms of the composition?
It was. It's like a rectangle, and then you sort of torque that rectangle to another direction. I do it in a lot of them, actually, with this slice of light, where you sort of change the geometry.
But it doesn't seem to happen like pro forma. I think you do it as
That's right. No, it does. It doesn't happen pro forma. You're right. I insert it. Absolutely.
So just in line with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Kind of process that unfolds.
Well, the other process, I do like to work on over old paintings. In fact, I can see a few of these that if they come home, they're going to be redone. And because I love that surface, and I think it's like, I don't know, it's like archaeology. I paint over old paintings, and you can scrape and scratch and find something underneath it that's unexpected. And that's kind of exciting when you can find something that you don't add to it. You're struggling and scraping and finding something that you didn't expect to find.
But it's going to make it into an interview. So I see a little Wyatt in these, and I'm wondering if that's a new influence from you.
I do love Wyeth's, all three of them.
Why not?
I know.
I'm curious because.
Well, I think illustration. I think he's very illustrative, don't you? Well, all three of them.
That's a big word. You want to get into that?
It is a big word.
What was the word?
Illustrative.
Oh, yeah. I just want to say that, yes, it's Wyeth like.
The-
I like it better than most Wyeths because it's got so much humanity in it. It's got a little touch of humor. And all the skills that I see that he has is amazing.
Thank you. You mean the portrait?
Yes, the one
Yeah.
with the guy with the gun.
Yeah, that's my husband. He would never hunt, but.
I find the portraiture fascinating. I do a lot of different kinds of painting, and I find the academic world is still having problems of snobbery about people who want to sit around and do a portrait. As they see it, they ought to cut it out. It's just another painting to me, but it's more than a painting.
Absolutely. Well, we do communicate. I mean, the face is sort of like.
Look at every little patch of every painting is a little abstract.
It is, absolutely.
Including parts of that.
Absolutely.
Oop, I just spilled all my drink.
Oops.
That's all right.
Whoops.
It was worth it.
Yeah. One thing I do with what you were suggesting, and Dan and I were part of a drawing group for a long, long time in Belfast. It's still going on. So I do draw every single week except for today. And it does help. It helps your hand, it helps you understand and it also helps you sort of like understand the form, how people move, the light and shadow. But it also allows you to exaggerate. So if you know how a form, a person is made, you can also take it and shift it to sort of exaggerate it and use it to explain or do something else with it. So I draw every week, and I think it does help. I think it does help with the figurative stuff, because it can be sort of automatic.
I have a 97-year-old pen pal, an artist from Essex, Mass, and she's still going to drawing every single week.
Well, drawing is interesting.
Same as you do about it.
Right, the drawing is interesting. As a painting, when you're painting, you are turning, you're mixing, and there is a dance. There is that dance of like you're very active and you're working, and then there's that stepping back and you're reflecting, and then you're back again working. So painting is a kind of dance, whereas with drawing, I think it's more of an extension of your hand. Although you're translating color into light and shadow, it's so beautifully automatic. It's like an extension of your hand. I just really love that act of drawing, and I think and also one thing about painting with me is they never seem, I could work on these forever and forever, and they never seem to feel resolved. I always see something that I want to change. I'm sure all of you have that same experience. But with drawing, you go in, it's 2.5 hours, and if it didn't work, fine. If it worked, it's great. So there is something about resolution with drawing that I don't feel with painting. But
Your drawings?
it's hard. It's a figure. No one wants to look at the figure.
Oh, no.
I mean, do you draw?
Yeah.
Okay. Grant, are you still drawing the figure?
I'm sorry?
Grant behind you. I'm just curious.
I do, but I don't show.
Yeah.
I have a question about decay and your work, and I think it's a really important element. And the way that you paint addresses it seems to me, and it's something you kind of embrace. So, I don't know what to say beyond that, but I think it creates a culture in your work that permits you to do. I mean, there's a contrariness about the work. I've known it a long time, so I'm speaking from some of the knowledge, but I feel like I look at that tiger up there with a baby on it.
That's Eros. That's Eros.
It's really screwing around. It's really pushing people. And then I look over here at the kind of half-rotten octopus, and I think, you just will not back off of some subjects, which I think a lot of artists with this. And I find that really brave and true.
Do you think that's age? Do you think it's age? I think that...
And then you examine your marriage in these very critical ways. And they're not like, they're not telling any stories. I just feel like you look at reality in a very frank way. And it's painterly. And it's real.
But I also think that I don't think I would have done these paintings 10 years ago. I do think that there's a beauty about age and still being able to paint. I do think I'm very fortunate. I think people of my economic level, and if you become a parent, I was so fortunate. I had support, I had encouragement, but I also had discipline. And so I never, in all my adult life, I've always been able to do this. And I can't say that there's a lot of people who have the longing, but they haven't had the opportunity. And so in that way, I feel supported and I feel fortunate. At the same time, I feel fortunate also to be this old and to be this untethered to concern about what the judgment's going to be. I don't care. And that's a delight.
Can't get better.
Well, you can always get better. So, one can. One can. I love that painting of yours in the Cove Street. That was such a beautiful painting. You shut up. So.
Are you Eros and this Bob the tiger?
No. Eros is pissing.
Yes. Oh, I'm missing that.
It could be, but it isn't. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So let's see. I don't think I have. There's a quote from Thomas Mann: "A work eventually has its own will," and I really like that. Where you work a long time, and I work and scrape and work a long time, and there's something that happens along that way. And I think maybe writers would say this, or any other artist might say this, where suddenly they have its own voice. And the work sort of says, well, this needs to be darker, or this needs to be smaller. And that's kind of exciting when you see that, and it kind of, it's a little, it sounds a little magical, but there's something that happens after a while that it takes, and it tells you what to do. So that's.
How many hours a day do you paint?
I'm lucky I can paint about 6 hours a day. Yeah. But sometimes I don't do all 6 hours. I'm doing, I've got Sudoku to do, and yeah. But you a painter too?
No, not at all.
No.
Pianist. Yes.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So that's it. I'm done. I'm sorry. Yeah. Is that okay? Wasn't it formal enough? Was it formal enough? No, okay.
That's perfect.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Sure. Any questions? Yeah.
How do you decide whether you're working on canvas or panel?
I really prefer panel because I spend so much time, and you can really abuse it and scrape it and sand it. And whereas canvas sometimes is, and also when you go outside, the real evil outside is wind. And that'll just, if you have a canvas and it tips over, you don't know what's going to happen to that canvas. So I prefer panel. How about you?
I don't like the texture of the canvas or linen or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that panel, I just need to, it's just too slick.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make that
Yeah,
slick.
yeah. I have a friend who, Eve Mansdorf, have you heard of her? She takes, a lot of these, they do have canvas on the board, and so that gives it a nice texture to start with. Well, rabbit skin glue, I don't know if would that bother you to use? There's another alternative, isn't there? No, if you use it right away. Smells like soup? Yeah, Wayne.
Didn't you have a little period back when Norman Rockwell was inspired in you?
Oh yeah, I love him. Yeah. Did I have a period in which Norman Rockwell had I was inspired by Norman Rockwell, and I was. I love, there's Michael Sowa is another inspiration. He's a German illustrator, but Norman Rockwell, I love the American sentiment of that. He's so diminished. I mean, people just don't have a lot of regard for him, but he is along with the Wyeths. I think he's really significant and important.
Rockwell and Bouguereau when I was in undergrad.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like they're both trash. And
I know.
they're, you know.
I know, and people would go up to Norman Rockwell and say, well, my teacher thinks you suck. And
I mean, what's with this pigeonholing quote illustrators as not real artists?
I don't get it.
I mean, I think it's completely bogus.
It is bogus.
Like Wyeth or Rockwell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I guess I use the word illustrative, but
Illustrative versus pigeonholing somebody as illustrator.
That's true. That's true. I suppose there's a difference if you have like a specific narrative that you're trying to pigeonhole there. But no, Norman Rockwell is certainly important in my. He's a genius. Yeah. And his hand is incredible. There's nobody like that.
Another comment about Rockwell. I went to his studio. All I would say that he had to suffer from this constant condescension.
He did.
One of the things I saw that impressed me the most is the one he did that was for the lay person, and many artists, they would never have known it wasn't actually painted by Jackson Pollock.
Oh, because of
He
the.
could do whatever he wanted to. That's amazing.
And
I was
also-
jealous as hell of him for not only painting brilliantly, but making a ton of money and being beloved.
Yes. Also, if you think about art making a change, and I don't think art really does make changes, but when I was a kid, I think it was Life magazine, they did the cover was the little Ruby Bridges walking.
Yeah.
And I think it has such a huge circulation, and it was right during the pivotal civil rights era. And people saw that, and I think it changed people's minds. It was a very poignant and difficult image to look at. Do you know what I'm talking about, Wayne? The little girl. Yeah, that was a good and interesting. And
War photos too.
yes, yeah, yeah. But that one I remember. And I remember my parents talking about it. And it just, I think he made a difference. And that's another problem with art is I always think that maybe there's things I could do to make a difference in the world, and I don't know if art really does. That's all.
I think art does.
Okay.
I think that art can reach people on a visceral, emotional level, like the Ruby Bridges, or like the Tiananmen Square.
Okay,
I think those
okay.
things sear into your imagination. It's like, it is worth 1,000 words. And I'm a writer, but it's like there's things you can't grasp with language that you feel and you know.
And it is another language.
And
Yeah.
but I would include literature and music in that, but I do think that art can convey things. It's the things that fall through the cracks that there are
That's true.
score that are captured
Okay.
in that, and I think it can change.
Yeah.
So that's just me.
No, it's true. It's true. Okay. Thank you.
One more super pedantic question. Not pedantic. What kind of brushes do you like?
I do like something called Pro Stroke. They're pure bristle. They're inexpensive. They're from Jerry's Artorama. And I like them because you can scrub them down, but then they don't disappear.
There you go.
Yeah, and they're cheap, so I don't have to really worry about them. I don't use sables. And then I like these little liners to kind of draw with. Yeah.
Addressing the opposite of what he just said, the two funniest things in my world when I was near the selling art, supplies,
Okay.
was I have a tiny DVD hanging on the wall of my studio that says "Learn to paint in 1 hour." the other one is 50 brushes for $4.99.
I can imagine those brushes.
I keep them.
Yeah. They're kind of the big tin. Yeah. Anyway. Thank you.
The artist you mentioned that shows up the turtle gallery.
Oh, Gillian Pedersen Craig.
Okay.
Yeah. and just a hero. I guess the heroes I have are, I guess it would be E.M. Sonica. Have you heard of him? These are real dense. He's contemporary. And then Cotan, Rubens, and then Michael Soa, who is a German illustrator. Those are people I look at all the time, and they always inspire. Yeah. Do you know Cotan? Spanish? Still life?
Keep listing artists, but I don't-
Well,
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
A little bit about one of my favorite lesser-known artists, Charles Birchfield.
Okay, yes, I got a quote here.
See, I wanted to know if you knew about it.
Yeah. The artist's vision when he starts a picture is superior to what he's able to do. Later, that initial vision fades and the work gains in value. I like that idea, which basically
It's great.
we come with a preconceived idea of what we want and then it goes away.
So I'm curious, how many of you know about Charles Birchfield?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There, that's the most I've ever seen in one room. Yeah, that's great. All right.
Nancy, have you done enough?
Hmm?
Should we?
We can have candy. We have candy.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah, we have candy.
Thank you very much. That was gorgeous.
Thank you very much.